Both public and behind-the-scenes diplomatic efforts continued Thursday to forge a consensus on what and now, if any, response should be made. In London, Prime Minister David Cameron went to Parliament to outline plans for an imminent military strike as soon as the UN considers the matter. But even members of his own party revolted and warned him to heed the lessons of Iraq. In Paris, after meeting with the head of a Syrian opposition group, French President François Hollande said that a political solution is needed, but that could only happen if the international community could halt killings like last week's chemical attack and better support the opposition. In Moscow, U.S. Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel held talks with his Russian counterpart to attempt to join the coalition, or at least not veto any UN resolution. Russia is a strong supporter of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. For his part, Assad told visiting politicians from Yemen that Syria will defend itself against any aggression and continue to deny involvement in the chemical massacre. In Israel, the government responded to threats of retaliation by handing out gas masks to its citizens. Military moves are also underway today. Russia moved 2 warships to the East Mediterranean, but Moscow denied this meant it was beefing up its naval force there as Western powers prepare for military action against Syria.
In the Mediterranean, the U.S. could use destroyers and submarines, while the British and French could carry out attacks using submarines, helicopter carriers and frigates. The U.S. also has air bases in Incirlik and Izmir in Turkey, while the British have one in Cyprus. The U.S. also has a base in Jordan. The U.S. has 2 aircraft carriers in the United Arab Emirates, the USS Nimitz and the USS Harry S. Truman, while the French could make use of an airbase in the United Arab Emirates. Targets could vary between air bases. High concentrations of military personnel and warehouses in places such as Damascus, Homs, Hama and Aleppo.
As the political and military moves are underway, diplomatic lawyers are working on drafting the legal reasons for use of force in what is a civil war. Jeremy Levitt he's director of the Center for International Law and Justice at Florida A&M University College of Law. Jeremy, welcome to Rise America.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm the former director, but I'm happy to be with you.
Okay, good enough. Thank you for that correction. Let's talk about legal ramifications for this. For this particular possible conflict that the United States and its allies may get themselves involved in, everybody's looking for legal reasons to go in to Syria. But that certainly wasn't the case in Kosovo, where before that conflict even started, there were at least several airstrikes there, and it certainly didn't happen in Libya. Why all the search now for legal justification for this?
Well, let me just say this. There was a search for a legal justification for the use of force in Kosovo, but the reality was they couldn't find one. And so NATO decided to bomb Kosovo for 72 days and call it some type of humanitarian intervention. The problem here is we have a mission creep. We have forces on the ground that are involved with training and supplying weapons to the Syrians. So in fact, America is a party to the conflict in Syria. Now what we're trying to say is, Syrians, you're bad because you're using chemical weapons. If that is in fact true, yes, the Syrians are bad and they're in breach of international law. But the question then is, what should the legal response be? There's only 2 ways that the United States can involve itself in an armed conflict. One, in self-defense, if it's attacked by another country. And 2, if it's acting in accordance with the United Nations Security Council resolution. In this case, the scrambling that you're seeing is because there is really no legal impetus at all from the international community or no good legal rationale that we can come up with to justify our intervention into Syria. Now, if we're saying that he used chemical weapons and the Obama administration wants to invoke what's called a right of humanitarian intervention or responsibility to protect, which would be limited to protecting civilians, perhaps that would be a viable basis. But he can't claim that right now because we don't even know who used the chemical weapons. We've implied who's using it. We have a sense of who might be using them. But the reality is we don't know, and the UN inspectors haven't concluded their job yet. If the Obama administration uses force here without Security Council authorization, it is acting unlawfully. And it sets a poor example. The president said there's an international norm against the use of chemical weapons, and his advisors clearly haven't told him there's an international norm against the use of force in countries without Security Council authorization.
Right, Jeremy, and of course, if we do get involved with this, no matter how you look at it, it's going to be one hot mess. But let's talk about the moral compass here. who are we as a country, I should say, as the United States, as a country, to talk about moral compass and involving itself in a civil war where chemical weapons were allegedly used, when we, at the time, Iraq was an ally with us with the Iraq War. Chemical weapons were used there. We also used chemical weapons in part, Agent Orange in Vietnam. So all of a sudden now the United States is the moral compass?
Well, not only the moral compass, but obviously the moral police of the world. The reality of it is this. We should be involved in an international effort to try and bring peace to Syria. But unilateral military force and the use of unilateral military force under the auspices of chemical weapons is just a farce. And this is why the international community is not going to go for it. There is an approach that the Obama administration can take. What they should do is argue for this case to be referred to the International Criminal Court for investigation. And that would be short of using military force. And let the International Criminal Court then investigate the use of chemical weapons and bring charges against the Assad government if they in fact did so. Then the Security Council can imply use of force measures to go after the Assad regime, at least to arrest members of its regime. But any other form of use of force is not only hypocritical, but the International Court of Justice made a finding against the United States in the Nicaragua case that we can't do the very thing that we're seeking to do here. And in fact, we're training and supplying weapons to a country involved in armed conflict, and that by itself raises questions about the legality of U.S. action as it stands today.
Indeed, Jeremy. Quick question, last question for you. UN inspectors say they should perhaps be leaving Syria by Saturday before they make any sort of comprehensive report. That being said, and also other countries like France, as well as the UK, kind of backing down somewhat, do you think that a military attack by the United States is imminent?
I think that there are plans on the table. I think the problem is the legal basis for doing it. Certainly we have the capacity and there appears to be the political will, but who are we to attack a government? There will be collateral damage. Civilians will be killed. We don't have a sense of who the replacement government would be. Would it be worse than the government that's in place now, as we're seeing in Egypt, as we've seen in Tunisia? I think that Barack Obama needs to hire better advisors, because if we keep pointing our guns at the Middle East and the Muslim countries, the very thing that he wants to avoid, which is terrorism in the United States, will come back to bite us in a big way. And the Syrians are very old people, and they're not afraid of war, and war is not new to them. You have Lebanon there, you have Israel there. You could see an enormous conflation of conflict by attacking Syria. I don't think it's the right strategy. I think there's a diplomatic solution, and my hope would be that Ban Ki-moon would speak more fervently on this question. U.S. military action in Syria will be a huge mistake.
I think a lot of people would agree with you on that. Jeremy Levitt, Jeremy, thank you for all of you.